life's too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. In the studio today, and this is going to be a little bit of a different one. I had a request from Slurpy Dave. If you're not aware of him, this is his channel. Check it out, give him a like, give him a subscribe. He's an all-round good egg. But he asked me what my top 5 Sabbath albums were. So, I thought that is an absolutely capital idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run down my Sabbath top 5. I got into Black Sabbath in, I would say, about 1984. I think it was 13, going on 14 years old. At the time, I was really into punk music, really into oi music, and didn't really have time for heavy metal at all. And I remember watching an advert on the telly with Daley Thompson for Lucozade, and it had the Phantom of the Opera song by Iron Maiden. And I remember thinking at the time, that is a great track. And I thought maybe I should check this heavy metal out a little bit more, because I really wasn't into metal at all. If it wasn't punk and it wasn't oi, I was not interested. I was into bands like GBH, the Anti-Nowhere League, the Cockney Rejects, Cock Sparrow, the Business, who else? All the usual punk, Sex Pistols, Stranglers, the Damned, all that kind of thing. You get the picture. And then along came the Lucozade ad with the Phantom of the Opera in, and yeah, I thought metal needs to be checked out. And I sort of put it on the back burner. And one day I ended up in a library, and this library loaned out records and tapes, believe it or not. It was in Tottenham. It's gone now, I think, but it was up near High Cross in Tottenham. And I went in there and I was very superficial at the time. Some might say I'm still superficial now, but nothing really sort of caught my eye. But I did see 2 albums that looked like they had great covers. One was Black Sabbath, Born Again, and the other was Judas Priest, Defenders of the Faith. And I remember getting them both out, getting them home. There were tapes, remember, not on vinyl, sticking them. The first one I put on was Born Again by Black Sabbath. First track, Digital Bitch. That was it for me. I thought this needs to be investigated a bit more. And eventually I started listening to more and more Sabbath, and they quickly became not only a great influence on me for music, but also a great influence as a musician as well. When I was about 15 or 16, I wanted to be Geezer Butler. For me, he was the epitome of everything you needed to be on a bass guitar. And then I started picking up little bits of guitar, copying Tony Iommi's riffs, I should say, and they were inspirational for me. I'm sure other bands and other musicians, well, I know other bands have definitely been influenced by them, but certainly musicians have definitely been influenced, certainly Tony Iommi. In my opinion, there are certain musicians, let's take guitarists for example, who really have changed the way the guitar is played. I would say without a doubt, yes, Jimi Hendrix. I'm talking about rock now. There's other genres that have had their own virtuosos, but for me, Jimi Hendrix was really the person who changed the way the guitar was played. Then along came Eddie Van Halen. And for me, they're the top 2. But one who wasn't as technical, but did spark off a whole number of genres in music, especially in metal and rock, was Tony Iommi. Just with his absolute pig-headed adherence to the riff being the main thing of a song. And you can hear that influence now in so many bands. I mean, you only have to listen to bands like Iron Maiden, Slayer, bands like Clutch, Black Label Society, all heavily influenced by Black Sabbath. And there's a whole genre of stoner rock, doom metal, sludge, all influenced by Sabbath. So I would say that Black Sabbath were and will always be the godfathers of metal. You didn't come here to hear that, did you? You came here to hear what my top 5 was. So without further ado, let's get down to it. Yes, a very unusual choice, some might say, but for me, and I really do love Sabbath. I mean, they are my favourite band of all time. This album stood out for me. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like almost everything that Sabbath have done, but for me, this album, I don't know what it was. I bought it second hand from a place called Record and Tape Exchange in Camden Town, and I think it was about £1 or something. That would have been in about 1985 or 1986. and I just played it to death. The two songs that really stood out for me, and one of them is my all-time favourite Black Sabbath song, that is Hole in the Sky. I think that is just a superb song. The album came out in 1975, and for songs like that to be on there really did cement their position as the godfathers of heavy metal. But there's other great tracks on there too. Now, if you look at the history of that album, that was recorded under very adverse circumstances. They were going through big lawsuits with their management company, and if you listen to the song The Writ on that album, that is about their dealings with, I think it was Tony Meehan Enterprises. And yeah, it was, in Geezer Butler's own words, he said they were handing us writs while we were recording in the studio. And that's where the title for the song came from. But yeah, just a fantastic album. The cover, yeah, the rumours go that they were told that they could just turn up in anything they wanted, they'd get photographed and they'd put the clothes on afterwards, the photographer would. And that's the reason Bill Ward is wearing a pair of his wife's tights or something like that. Ozzy Osbourne is in a kimono, and yeah, the fashions are horrendous on that album cover. And it really, to be honest, it's not a great album cover, but it more than makes up for it in the music. So for me, and a lot of you will disagree, and you're perfectly entitled to do so, but for me, my number one album from Sabbath is Sabotage. Again, a controversial choice, Born Again. A lot of people say that this album should never have been called Black Sabbath. It should have been called something else, because Ian Gillan really didn't belong in Black Sabbath. Well, I'm here to tell you that's wrong. For me, this was the album that got me into Sabbath, and it was what made me persevere with Sabbath, because this album really did grab hold of me. The opening track on the tape, Digital Bitch, really did grab hold of me. And one thing I did notice was the production on it was very bass heavy. Now, there is a story behind that apparently the band were in all sorts of turmoil. If you read the history of Ian Gillan's time in Black Sabbath, it's very tumultuous. It involves a lot of alcohol. It involves a lot of mishaps on stage, shall we say. It really was like Spinal Tap in their own words. And if you read about it, it was, I mean, the song Trashed, for example, was about Ian Gillan in a car, drunk out of his nut, driving around on the estate and crashing it. And this is them supposed to be recording an album. Great influence for songs on the album, but Jesus Christ, best not to try and kill yourself, eh? But for me, some of the standout tracks and the highlights on this album are Digital Bitch, Trashed, my favourite song off the album, and again, another great song by Sabbath, which is criminally underrated, Disturbing the Priest. Again, not a lot of people may like that song, but I absolutely love it. I think it's great, it's off the wall, it's got fantastic lyrics. I'm not sure whether Ian Gillan or Geezer Butler wrote them lyrics, but they are very pertinent and very to the point, and that's why that's my number two. Number three, an absolute classic from Black Sabbath. This was them really cementing their position as an established rock band. And Volume 4, in their own words, was fueled by bags and bags of cocaine. I think Tony Iommi said that the cost of the cocaine that was consumed during that recording far outweighed the actual cost of the recording. And the song Snowblind on that was influenced by that. I know, you know, don't do drugs, kids, and all that, but they were singing about what they knew. Now, for me, some of the standout tracks, and one in particular, which is again one of my all-time favourite Black Sabbath tracks, is Supernaut. I think that is just an absolutely superb song. If ever there was a song that inspired stoner rock, then it's Supernaut. I think it's just a great song, great riff on it, and just a great song off a great album. The song Wheels of Confusion, again for me, was another classic. Now again, some people may say that that was not a great track. It flitted about with time signatures and all that, but for me it was just a great song. And the whole album in general just blew me away. I love the production, I love the hard-edged guitar sound on that as well. It's pure, dirty 70s guitar rock, and I love it. And I think it's brilliant, and it's an inspirational album. I think Tony Iommi played fantastic on there, as did Geezer Butler and Bill Ward as well. And yeah, for me, that's number three, a great album. Number four, Master of Reality. Now, this came out in 1971, and again, if there was an album that ever inspired doom rock, then this was it. This is an absolutely fantastic album. Now, people may say, oh, the first Black Sabbath album was great. Yeah, it is. It's a superb album. No argument from me whatsoever. And some people might say Paranoid was a better album. I'm sort of on the fence. Certainly there's some great tracks on that, Paranoid and War Pigs. But for me, Master of Reality, it just had so many good tracks, and it really did bring home how much Tony Iommi was emphasising the riffs on his songs, or on Black Sabbath songs I should say, and that really was their trademark, and this really did establish that. I mean, some of the tracks on there, Sweet Leaf for example, very, very simple riff but just so effective. Also you had, for me, Lord of This World, a great riff which you can hear in a lot of Pantera songs, that type of progression. Obviously Dimebag Darrell was influenced by Tony Iommi in some way. You can hear a lot of Tony's playing in some of the Pantera stuff. But again, it just had so many great tracks. Tomorrow's Dream, an absolute classic. And I remember listening to that album, and I was reading one of the first books I'd ever read. I mean, I was absolutely useless at school, but I did find a copy of A Clockwork Orange, I should say, by Anthony Burgess, in the road of all places. Found it in the road, took it home, read it, started listening to Master of Reality, reading the book, and the whole book just fitted in with that soundtrack. Brilliant, absolutely amazing album. I'm sure many people have got that down in their top 5 Sabbath, but for me that is a great album. I couldn't possibly leave this one out. This is Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath. Now again, this was in a transition period of the band. When Ozzy left in 1978, the rest of the band were in a complete and utter turmoil as to what direction the band was going to go and whether the band was even going to exist at all. Trying to find a suitable vocalist to fill Ozzy's shoes. Now Ozzy, even by his own admission, isn't the greatest singer, but he really did suit Sabbath, and whatever chemistry they had together, they'd sort of lost when Ozzy left, so they really did need somebody big to fill them boots. And although he wasn't big in stature, what a voice. Ronnie James Dio. Now Ronnie James Dio was already established in Rainbow as a great vocalist for Rainbow. In fact, one of my favourites, Graham Bonnet, yeah, he was good, and Joe Lynn Turner, yeah, another great singer. But for me, in Rainbow, Ronnie James Dio did the best songs, in my opinion. That album, Long Live Rock and Roll, I absolutely loved that. That was a fantastic album. But then obviously he's joined Black Sabbath in 1980. Well, not in 1980, a little bit before that, and they started writing songs. And the whole approach, the whole sound of Black Sabbath changed, in my opinion, for the better as well. They sort of caught up with the times in what was happening with the new wave of British heavy metal and other metal around the world. Certainly America was starting to make headway with some absolutely fantastic. And Black Sabbath in 1978, I did have a friend who actually went to a Black Sabbath concert in 1978 when Van Halen supported him, and he said Black Sabbath were terrible and Van Halen absolutely blew him away. And I suppose that's part of the course. Van Halen were a superb band, and Black Sabbath were obviously going for a very tumultuous period of their history, and it doesn't take a genius to work out that that's not going to work out in their favour. But for me, I think this album really did put Black Sabbath on the map, and people started to take them seriously again, because this album really is chock full of some fantastic tracks. Now the standout track for me, I mean there are so many. Heaven and Hell, of course, the title track is a brilliant track. Neon Nights, another superb track. But the one that did it for me was Die Young. I really did think that was a fantastic up-tempo, heavy, aggressive track, and I loved it, and I still play it to this day. It's one of my all-time favourite songs, not just by Black Sabbath, but of all time. And the musicianship on that album really did influence, again, my bass playing and guitar playing as well. So for me, Black Sabbath reinvented themselves, and they did it in absolutely fantastic fashion. So for me, you could argue that this should be further up the chain, but I'm going to put that at number 5. This is just my personal top 5 Black Sabbath albums. Your top 5 albums are probably going to be a little bit different. In fact, I'm more or less guaranteed that they are. There is no right and wrong answers to this. The bottom line is, if you like Black Sabbath, you're winning in life. So please put your comments in the section as to what your top 5 Black Sabbath albums are. I would be absolutely intrigued to know what they are. As a bonus, I am going to give you my top 5 Black Sabbath songs. So again, there are just so many to choose from. Black Sabbath have got such an astounding discography of great tracks, influential tracks, absolute rock classics and some absolutely superb metal songs. Now again, number one, not many people are going to like this song, and I get it. It came off the Never Say Die album, which again, as I mentioned in the previous section, this is when Black Sabbath were going through a very tumultuous period in their history, and Ozzy Osbourne was on the verge of leaving. The album took ages to make, apparently. Bill Ward even sings on one of the songs, and yeah, I think that was an unconscious nudge at Ozzy's position, because he just wasn't into this album at all. Even now he does say in interviews that he hates that album. However, Over to You was an absolutely brilliant song, and it really did strike a chord with me, because I remember listening to it, and at the time I was at school. I was in my last year at school. I mean, I got booted out when I was 15, but I absolutely hated it, and the lyrics on this track really did strike a chord with me, and I absolutely loved the track. I loved the slow pace of it, I liked the riff on it, and the heaviness of it as well. And I think Never Say Die does get a bit of a bum rap, and it really shouldn't, because there are some good tracks on there. I like Never Say Die. I mean, Never Say Die was trying to keep with the punk music that was popular at the time. It's quite up-tempo, and it's got a chorus on it. And here's a little tidbit for you. If you listen to the first 4 Black Sabbath albums, not one of the songs has got a chorus. So I bet you didn't know that. There you go. Over to You. What a great track. What a good album. Number 2, as I mentioned in the previous section, Supernaut by Black Sabbath. Super riff, just a great high energy rock song. And you got to remember, this was 1972, and for the heaviness and the vocal performance on it as well, it just, I don't know, on that album it really did stand out as being a great track. Up tempo, great musicianship on it. I love the track, it's catchy. Again, as I mentioned in the previous section, there's no chorus on it, but it's still a catchy track. What makes it catchy? It's the riff, in my opinion. And if you can make a song catchy just by the riff, I think that's a little bit special. And number 3, as I mentioned in the previous section on Sabotage, which is my favourite Black Sabbath album, you've got Hole in the Sky. Now this track was heavy, believe me. If there was heavy tracks on Paranoid, if there was heavy tracks on the first Black Sabbath album, and if there's heavy tracks on Master of Reality, I don't think they come much heavier than Hole in the Sky. I would argue that for the first 5 Black Sabbath albums, you could say that Sabbath Bloody Sabbath was maybe a little bit heavier, but Hole in the Sky for me is just an amazing track. I love it. I love its ponderous heaviness, the huge riff that's in there. Ozzy's vocal performance. He wasn't a great singer, as I've said, but he just suited this band, and the songs that they wrote really did fit in with his vocal style. I love it. I think it's a great song. I've done a bass cover on the channel if you want to have a quick search on the channel and have a look at that, but it's one of my favourites. I absolutely love it. Number 4, Die Young. Now, I've just discussed that in the last section, and again, that for me is an absolutely superb track. I love that it's the up-tempo, aggressive side of Sabbath that you don't see too often, but when it does come out, it's just brilliant. And of course, you had Ronnie James Dio singing on that, and that was his first album with Black Sabbath. And again, he just put in a performance that even he says, there's a video out on YouTube where you can see him being interviewed with going through all his albums, and it comes to Heaven and Hell, and he just says what a great album it was. And I don't think he's blowing smoke up his own arse. I think he's being absolutely spot on, because that is a great album. And when it came out, obviously I wasn't into Black Sabbath at the time, but it did make huge waves when it came out. Everybody had written Black Sabbath off, and they came back with something like that. And with tracks like Die Young on there, that really was 2 fingers up at the people that said Black Sabbath were finished. They were far from finished. And finally, again another controversial one, but I absolutely love the track, and it's Disturbing the Priest off the Born Again album, which came out in 1983. Now, as I said, this was my gateway to Black Sabbath, if you like, and I didn't really like this song at first. Then I started listening to the lyrics, and at the time, obviously my parents are both Irish. I was raised a Roman Catholic. I was forced to go to church, and this song didn't really strike a chord with me at the time, because I don't know, I was into all the other stuff as well, you know, the punk stuff and all that. But listening to it as I got older, I really did think that the lyrics were pertinent, and even more now, more than ever, in my opinion. And I love it. I think it's a great track. It's very off the wall, which is sort of a Sabbath trademark. They do these tracks now and again which are really off the wall, which says they're not scared to experiment, and this track really does have some strange time signatures. It's got an absolutely superb, and I do mean superb, performance by Ian Gillan, and that really does, I mean, if you didn't know already with Deep Purple, but that album, Born Again, really did highlight what a range Ian Gillan did have, and for me he's one of my all-time favourite rock singers. He really is. I don't think there's many out there that can beat him. I mean, some people have argued that Rob Halford can, and I will say that is a valid argument. Obviously with these arguments there's no right and wrong answer, but Rob Halford is an absolutely superb singer, and I think he's about the only one that can come close to Ian Gillan in terms of range. Maybe Freddie Mercury as well, but that's another discussion. But some people have said Ronnie James Dio is as good as Ian Gillan. I mean, he is in a way, but I don't think the two can compare. They're two different types of singer, different types of voice, and both great in my opinion. But for me, Ian Gillan was the man when it came to that, and that album and that song in particular really was a showcase for his vocal range, and it's just brilliant. I love it. I love the lyrics, I love the odd time signatures on it, and I love the heaviness of it as well. Just a superb track. So there you go, that is my top 5 Black Sabbath songs. Now that could change, they change weekly, and again, as I say, there's no right or wrong answer. Ask me again in a couple of weeks and I could have 5 completely different songs. The bottom line is, for me, Black Sabbath are a great band, if you didn't already get that message. And there's an old saying, I'll leave you with this old saying. There's only 2 things in life that you can trust. 1 is yourself. Number 2, the first 4 Black Sabbath albums. Like and subscribe. Well, the puppy gets it. Isn't that right, Purse? Yeah, get off.